All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Club Book with Tia Williams. My name is Shannon Gibney, and I am a locally based writer and professor, activist, and community member. So happy to be here with you tonight. Before I introduce tonight's guest properly, allow me a moment to tell you a bit more about the unique series that is bringing her to us. Club Book is a program of MELSA, the Metropolitan Library Service Agency, made possible through Minnesota's Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and coordinated by Library Strategies, part of the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library. Carver County Library is the co-organizer of this evening's talk. Thanks also to partnering bookseller Red Balloon Bookshop. A purchase link to 7 Days in June will be available in the comment section of this live stream feed. Have it shipped, pick it up at your lovely bookstore in St. Paul, the lovely Red Balloon Bookshop, or have them deliver it personally to your door if you're in the area. One final housekeeping note. Also in the comments, you'll see a survey link. MELSA would greatly appreciate hearing what you think of this Club Book program, and it's quick and easy. Now for our featured event. Tia Williams is a tour de force in the style industry. For more than 2 decades, she served as beauty editor for iconic magazines, including Elle, Glamour, and Essence. She also pioneered the beauty blog with her influential award-winning site, Shake Your Beauty. See, I want to say shake your booty, but no, it's Shake Your Beauty. Williams parlayed many of her firsthand experiences into The Accidental Diva, her debut novel, which, quote, accurately relates the joys and the pains of working in the beauty industry, end quote, in the words of Booklist. Her follow-up, The Perfect Find, garnered Williams the African American Literary Award for Best Fiction and is currently being adapted into a romantic comedy starring and produced by Gabrielle Union, which I think we're all going to be very interested to tune into that. Williams' latest novel, 7 Days in June, became an instant New York Times bestseller and gained a still wider audience as the Reese Witherspoon Book Club pick for June 2021. 7 Days in June tracks the star-crossed love story of Eva and Shane, two gifted writers with an undeniable chemistry but complicated personal history. As New York Magazine notes, quote, Williams creates an entire world around the new Black literati. It's Black without apology, qualification, or race-related tragedy, end quote. Okay, so after a short talk by our esteemed guest and some initial questions from me, we'll have time for audience Q&A. And you can simply drop your questions in the comments thread on Facebook, and our tech manager will route them to me. If you prefer to contribute a question a bit more anonymously, you can also send a private message to Club Book here on Facebook, or send an email to clubbookmn@gmail.com. So Tia, welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This is so exciting. It's such an honor to be here with you and everyone who's joining on the event. So again, I'm Tia Williams. My most recent book is 7 Days in June, and I'll just give you a quick sort of rundown of what it's about. So it follows two famous authors who seemingly randomly meet at a literary event in Brooklyn, and sparks fly, but what no one knows is that they actually know each other. And 15 years prior, when they were seniors in high school, they had one torrid week of romance that did not end well, and they hadn't spoken since then. But over the past 15 years, they've been communicating to each other through their books. So there's flashback elements. It takes place in present, I think 2019 or 2020. And it flashes back to when they were in high school in 2004. And I got the idea, I love writing love stories. It's what I've always done. And, you know, authors sit down to write something and it's almost like the genre picks them. You know, I could be writing about anything in a love story. A love story would come out of it. But I was watching Romeo and Juliet with Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes. And I had this thought, what if Romeo and Juliet didn't die? Like, what if they experienced this like wild teenage love, went a little crazy from it, and then walked away and became functional 30 somethings and ran into each other again as adults? Like, what would happen? And every writing professor will say, start a book with a question and then you answer it when you write it. And so that was the question that I started with. And it was just really fun to create this, you know, try to craft an iconic love story, where the characters are sort of larger than life and the stakes are high. And I grew up reading, you know, in the 80s, like Judith Krantz and Jackie Collins and Harold Robbins, like these big, Sidney Sheldon was more of like a thriller type, but I loved big over the top, sexy fiction, and it was all white people all the time. And so I would read these books and then recast them in my head as Black people that I knew, or like, you know, I read Wuthering Heights and decided that Heathcliff was Ralph Tresvant from New Edition. So I'm aging myself, but I'm also trying to explain the dearth of Black love in fiction back then. So I always felt like I wanted to grow up and write stories with us in them, so that, you know, no modern kid has to imagine a Black version of a character that she is reading. So yeah, that's 7 Days in June. This is the new paperback. She's very pretty.
Oh, beautiful. It's a beautiful cover too. I mean, I just looked at it and I was like, oh my God, exactly what you're talking about. I was like, Black love in color, like, and it just is like, so it just draws you in right away. So great work.
The team is so talented.
I mean, that's clear. And the color scheme pops. I know you're a beauty person, so you're probably always thinking about color. So we have like a lot of questions, as you know already, from the audience, and then I have my own questions. Of course, as I told you before, I love the book. I just was so taken with these two characters who just kept on changing. Like, I felt like I would kind of get a read on one of them and then something would shift and I'd be like, oh my God, I didn't realize that, you know, Eva had this whole side of her family based in Louisiana and, you know, Creole culture. But let me get to my first question, which is, you know, my questions are kind of like mini dissertations, so you can kind of dig in where you want, get in where you fit in. So about 7 Days in June, is this a love story? Is this a story? Okay,
sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, that's good. Okay. Is this a story about Black love and community and connection in a white dominant world? Is this a tale exploring mother-daughter relationships, a meditation on and a letter to the Black literary community? How do you personally think about what kind of book this is? And you talked about this in your introduction a little bit. You know, how did you think about it while you were writing it? Did you think about it at all? You know, sort of like what these kinds of, you know, different parts of the book were sort of weaving together?
I always get asked the genre question, and it's so difficult because I'm classified as romance, but because I follow the rules of romance, and they're very strict. Like, you have to have an HEA, a happily ever after. If there's a love story, no matter how big and great it is, but they don't end up together, then it's not romance. Very strict rules. So that's where like my books sit, but to me they're which I love. I love the romance industry, but in my brain, when I'm writing it, I'm writing contemporary fiction. Because of all those layers, I'm obsessed with side stories. I'm obsessed with side characters. My feeling is that a B character should come in as if they're walking from their book that's about them. So no one knows they're a side character, you know. Everyone thinks they're the main character. So they need to be fully fleshed out and have a story and have a purpose. And, you know, I like for everyone to have origin stories and where do they come from and what are they wearing and what are they thinking, what do they want. And
the descriptions told me so much about these characters. You know, I'm a novelist myself, and I do not, I mean, you know, like all the details about the Kafkins and like the different,
yes,
I mean, I was like, Shannon, you could learn a thing or two from this lady, because this is very good characterization, you know? It
well, that's my fashion magazine background, because look, it's a new blush for spring. Every spring there's a new pink blush, literally every spring. So what do? You have to write about this pink blush like it is the most transformative, important, universally gorgeous pink blush you've ever seen, and you have to describe the hell out of it in very colorful language, because all it is a pink blush. And so I took a lot that I learned growing up in the magazine industry, describing clothes and beauty, and I put that in my characterizations. And that's the first thing I do, is decide what, thank God for Pinterest, like decide exactly what they look like, what their style is, what they do with their hair. I mean, Black women, it tells you so much about who a person is. So yeah, I love all of those details. And I also love horror, and I love mystery, and so having flashbacks and burying little Easter eggs throughout the book that that link back to something in the flashback or links back to something in the present is just really fun for me.
Well, that is a great lead-in to my next question, which, I mean, what really struck me about the book was the humor in it, and the pop cultural references, you know, just like all throughout. I mean, is such a funny and entertaining read. And one example for folks, I just, you know, I don't want to assume that everybody's read the book or read all the way through, but this is on page 283. When Eva is taking her daughter Audrey, she's dropping her off at the airport to go to her Dadafornia trip. That's what they call it, right?
Yeah.
And they had a fancy brunch planned with Shane, who didn't show. And so Eva's trying to keep it together. She's so hurt. And her daughter is just very perceptive, of course, about her mother. And so she knows some of what's going on. Goodbye, my honey, she said, letting go. Have the best time, okay? And be safe. I will, don't worry, Audrey said with a smile. And Mom? Yes? I know you made up the IKEA excuse for Shane. So she, you know, told her daughter at the brunch that, oh, Shane texted that, you know, he was at IKEA putting together some IKEA furniture, and it was a disaster and he couldn't come. I know you're sad he didn't come, but give him a chance. He's a good person. I know he is. And I'm an incredible judge of character. You push stuff away that isn't safe and obvious, Mom, but love isn't safe and obvious. Love is risky. Take the risk, woman. Flabbergasted, Eva didn't even know which part of this speech to address. So instead, she dissolved into nervous, breathy laughter. How on earth would you know that love's risky? Audrey rolled her eyes. Hello, I know Lemonade by heart.
I forgot about that.
I laughed out loud when I mean, there were just like so many moments where I'm like, yeah, and this is how, you know, this tween would talk, right? And this is how, like, she would kind of, you know, weave in these little references to kind of it's like this not subtext, but, you know, like a very particular language that she and her mother speak together. And again, it's very entertaining to read, but then it also just does a lot for the characters too. It really makes them come to life. And so, I just want to say too that, writing humor is actually very hard. This is, I think a lot of people, writing, and it's not easy to do. And so how do you do it? Is it something that you have to intentionally think about, or does your writing just kind of come out that way?
Well, I don't think about it. I don't think that you can try to write funny. I think you write funny if you're a funny writer. Like, how do you create humor? Like, it just either it's there or it's not. And the only reason my books are funny is because that's what comes out. That's what I've always done. Like, we had to write about, we were doing like a horse. We were studying horses in 4th grade, and we had to write a short story about a horse. And like, they gave us this drawing of a horse, and we had to like color it in and like make it ours or whatever. And everyone's, writing rip-offs of like the Black Stallion. I mean, this is the 80s, right? Or like, Laura Ingalls Wilder in the prairie, riding a horse. And I wrote it from the perspective of a girl that was hiding a horse in the backyard of her suburban home. And every morning she brushed the horse's teeth with Colgate, which he loved. But that morning, daughter of a dentist, but that morning she brushed his teeth with Crest, which he hated. So he was so upset about his breath not smelling the way it usually does that it bucked and like kicked me off, and I went flying. And the teacher was like, "What are you? Like, what is this? Like, this was not like," I feel like life is so absurd that it's hard for me to tell a straight story in real life, and it's hard for me to write a straight-faced story in fiction, because the world we live in is totally ridiculous. So I like to bring out those elements, even in a sex scene, even in really dark, touching on dark topics, which 7 Days in June does. There's always something funny, I think.
And something ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, I love that what you just said about like, life is just funny. It's just, and I think because of a lot of the absurdity, and that definitely comes through. Okay, I'm going to ask one more question for myself, and then we're going to go to some from the audience. I mean, there are some really like, steamy sex scenes in this book. That also shows this like intense connection between the protagonists that they can't deny either. But I mean, how do you write a believable and non-cheesy sex scene? How do you go about doing that?
Well, so I think that the sex scene isn't separate than any of the other scenes. Like, it's not like you write the book and you go back and write the sex scenes separately. To me, they can't be pointless unless it's erotica. Those scenes aren't pointless was not the word I wanted to use. They shouldn't really be standalones. They should help push the narrative forward. They should do something to move the plot forward, just like any other scene or any other chapter. And so I like for you to find out things about characters and sex scenes, or, something is revealed, or something is a surprise, or, there's elements of what's happening in their story that are woven into the sex scene. So it just doesn't feel, embarrassing, which some of them feel embarrassing, especially if there's a huge tonal shift. Like, you're reading something and it's like, straightforward and direct, and then you get to the sex scene and they're talking about like love buttons and throbbing whatevers, and you're like, girl. So yeah, like, that's what I do. I like for it to really flow. Like, no spoilers, but like in the first sex scene my poor 13-year-old daughter, she's cringing in her room right now. But in the first sex scene in 7 Days in June, it was very specific to these two characters and where they were at the time. You have Shane, who is in recovery for 2 years and hasn't done it in 2 years because he's really been focusing on sobriety. You have Eva, who hasn't done it in longer than that, just because she's a single mom working her ass off and just hasn't had time. So they're both just kind of like, he's like, okay, this will be over in 2 seconds. And she's like, oh no, it's gonna hurt. And, you know, it's real for who these people are at that time. So it doesn't just feel like it was dropped in from softcore universe.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like, you know, when we meet them, there's like this charge right away, right? And it's definitely, you know, I mean, an emotional connection, a psychological, there's definitely a sexual aspect to it. And then it's like, you know, as they're going through that day together, I was just waiting, like, okay, something's going to happen. But the way that it happened, not to give spoilers, was very unexpected and kind of just cracked me up. And I felt like, in some ways, New York City was also, it was also sort of like a love letter to New York City in these very particular ways that were very poignant as well. So yeah, just kudos to you. Very, very well done.
Thank you.
So we have a question from the audience. What drove you to make the leap from fashion magazines and blogs to the novel medium?
So I've always done both. So I always knew I had these two obsessions growing up: reading and writing fiction and fashion magazines. And I was never conflicted. I always knew exactly what I was going to do. After college, I'm moving to New York. I'm writing for fashion magazines and I'm going to become a novelist. And so I moved here the summer of '97 after I graduated from University of Virginia with my little checklist of everything that I was going to do. And I started working as a beauty assistant at Elle. And I was so ready to write my book. And then I sat down to write my novel. And I was like, I don't have anything to write about because I haven't really done anything. So I was like, let me give myself a couple of years in New York to, like, you know, get the vibe of life and like get some experience. You know, I'm 21 years old. So by the time I was working at Glamour, like 3 years later, I was like, oh, life has happened. So I'm in the middle of Devil Wears Prada land at Condé Nast, like really cutthroat, tough, pre-Me Too, economic crash, pre-9/11, like money's flying around, like these huge budgets, these editors that are larger than life. You know, I had an editor throw a bagel at me once. And by then I dated a couple of charismatic assholes, and I was like, I have material now. And so quit my job. I put my stuff in storage. I'm like 24 at this point. I moved to Seville, Spain, to go on sabbatical for 6 months and teach English. And while I was there, I started writing what would be my first novel, The Accidental Diva. And I wrote it about this relationship that I had that was nuts. But in order to make me feel better, I almost use it as therapy. I turned it around and made him fabulous and gave him a happy ending. And it made me feel good. And when I came back to New York in January of 2002, I got an agent and I sold it, and that was my first novel. And so I've been like dual pathing since I was 24, doing both. Yeah.
And how has that, been for you? I mean, I know, writing novels can be pretty all-consuming. Sometimes you have to kind of like block out certain time periods where you can get like a first draft done, and then it's like, or how do you do it?
It's horrible. Like there's no two ways about it. Like it is so hard. Anyone with a full-time job who writes, also, you can't even say writes on the side, because you're consumed by it. It's not a side hustle. actually the hustle, and the 9 to 5 is so that I have a steady, paycheck. Because as we know, writers, we don't get into it for the money. But yeah, it's hard. The most important thing is having discipline, because if you don't have that, you can't do it. And it just is that simple, because there's always something more fun to do than to write. Always. Organizing your closet, watching Real Housewives, eating, like anything is better than writing. Writing is lonely, it's isolating, you're all alone, it's you and a laptop, and you don't know if you're killing it or bombing. You just have no way of knowing. And it's hard. So you have to think of like the most rigid micromanaging boss you've ever had, and you have to be that for yourself. And for me, that's the only way I've been able to do it. Like, no, you can't go to brunch with your friends. Okay, you can go on that girls' trip to Tulum, but you have to write till 4 every day, and then you can go hang out. Like, and my friends will say, like, yeah, Tia brings her laptop on trips. My family, yeah, it's Thanksgiving, everyone's in the kitchen, I'm somewhere writing. So you have to sacrifice in order to do it. But if it's that important, I always think of people who take fitness really seriously, and like they get up at 4 in the morning to run. My husband gets up at the crack of dawn and runs, and I can't fathom it, but it's that important to him. So that's what he has to do. It's the same thing for, juggling writing.
Thank you. I have another question from our esteemed audience. This person writes, I can't claim to have much in common with these wonderful characters, but I do suffer from debilitating cluster headaches. It was nice to see this kind of affliction reflected in a romance. I like that too, where folks are usually either hale and healthy or suffering from something truly fatal, a la The Fault in Our Stars.
Right.
Was this aspect of your protagonist story something you have personal experience with? If not, what did you research, or who did you talk to get it so right?
So Eva and I have a few things in common. Eva is the main character. When I was writing this, I was a single mother of a tween, and her dad and I got divorced when she was a baby. Hi, cutie.
Do you want to say hi? This is Marwan, my daughter. She's 7. Yes. Yes.
You guys look alike.
This is, that mini me. So yeah, Molly likes to say hello sometimes. This is my friend Tia. We're talking about her book.
I have a daughter too, but she's 13 now.
My son is 12, so he's more in line with.
Okay. Got it.
You take care of the dog. Okay. Yeah.
What was I saying?
Oh, I'm so sorry. The cluster headaches.
Yes. Okay. So the things that I have in common with Eva: single mother, writer, living in Park Slope, Brooklyn, Creole mother, and debilitating migraines since I was 9. So when I was writing about Eva and her pain, that was me. It's taken me a long time to write about chronic pain because it's not really fun. And I never really realized, I could never figure out how to get that into the severity of it into a book. Like, it ruins relationship, any kind of chronic pain. It messes with your work life, your private life, your friendships, your mothering, everything. And I wanted to figure out how to represent that without it being sick fic, which I also love, like The Fault in Our Stars. But I didn't want her diagnosis to be her entire personality, because it isn't mine.
I did think it was so well done. Like, I felt like reading it, it was this thing that moved through her, but it wasn't necessarily her. And really kind of, it just wasn't something that I was expecting from this particular book, which I appreciated. particularly in terms of like, how do people manage pain in their daily lives? Like, how does this, and particularly because she's a Black woman too, and we don't really have a lot of forums to talk about that, where the myth of the superwoman is still very much with us, right? So there's this person, I think it just contributed to this this reading of Eva as this person who has this, veneer of like togetherness, but underneath there's like all this other stuff that's going on, and so yeah, I just thought that was really interesting and really like an interesting facet that I wasn't expecting. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It just like touched on it in the first draft, and my editor was like, no, you have to really go into it. And it's so painful and triggering. Oh God, do I really have to describe what it feels like and what the days are really like and the shots and the pills and everything? And she was like, yes, you do. So yeah, I have a really great editor.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like when you have a great editor, what can happen? With your manuscript.
Definitely.
Next question. Let's see here. My book club had a discussion guide that included this deceptively simple prompt. Let's talk about Eva and Audrey's mother-daughter relationship. We had a lot to say, all bringing different personal experiences to that question. What would you have your readers take away from their story within the story? Is it based at all on your own mothering journey? And you talked like a little bit about your daughter in this, but yeah, especially when we have kind of like the mirroring of Lisette and Eva, and then Eva and Audrey, which it just, that whole, Eva and Shane are so different, but in terms of their upbringing and how they were both basically like abandoned, really intensely. So that's it's always me and my entourage when we do something. So thank you for understanding that. I just talk a little bit about the mother-daughter kind of themes in the book, if you would.
Yeah, so it definitely reflected my daughter. Like I have a very precocious kid, and it was just me and her. Her dad and I, in the book, Eva's ex-husband has Audrey Summers, but my daughter's father, my ex-husband, lives 10 minutes away. And when I was writing the book, he was actually within walking distance, and went back and forth. So we, shared custody. It's all good. But when she was in with me and in my home, it was just me and us. It was just the two of us for 9 years till I met my now husband while I was writing 7 Days of June. And that sort of estrogen bubble of, I don't know what it's like with single moms of sons, but with a single mom and a daughter, it can be pretty symbiotic. It's like this bubble of private rituals and a language that only the two of you speak, and this understanding, and the kid is always going to be precocious because she's hanging around with a bunch of 40-year-old ladies. So what does hopeless mean? Define that. Like, why do you feel hopeless? Like listening to my conversations with my friends in the kitchen. And she is one of those people that's always the most insightful in the room, and sometimes knows more than grown-ups do about human behavior. And that's where I got Audrey from. And I'm also obsessed with mothers and daughters. I grew up as the oldest of 3 daughters. My mom has 2 sisters. I have a million female first cousins, not a lot of boys in my family at all. And so just the relationship between mothers and daughters has always been really interesting to me. And I wanted to show how you can take, you know, a dysfunctional, toxic childhood and reverse it for the next generation and break those childhood traumas. But also what it does to you as a mother. I mean, Eva lied a lot. You know, she doesn't tell her daughter the truth about who her own mother is or how she grew up or what she was like, you know, as a kid or a teenager. She thinks she's protecting her, but when you aren't armed with information about where you come from, like, how do you move forward with any? I feel like you're not tethered sometimes, you know. And so, yeah, I just wanted to write about, you know, Eva discovering who, or wanting to go on the journey of discovering who her mom is, who her grandma is, who her great grandma is, and why she fits into this lineage, and, you know, why it's okay, and forgiving her, you know, her ancestors and her mother for being kooky and giving her this kooky life and the strain of weirdness that goes through the women in her family, and figuring out how to be okay with who she is instead of pretending to be someone she's not.
Yeah, I felt like you know, there's these really interesting ways that you're subverting the sort of dominant romance genre, you know, and one of them was, you know, I was just sort of like, oh, you know, we get, you know, okay, I don't know how many spoilers I could, you know, but we get the happy ending, you know, and they end up together, but it's sort of like not the way that you sort of think that it's going to go. There's a lot of fits and starts and whatever. But, you know, you also get the sense, you know, as the book progresses, that Eva is starting to understand that, like, you know, this relationship is not all that's going to heal her, that she has to do, you know, her own work in terms of the book that she needs to write, and in terms of you know, yeah, like dealing, well, in order to write the book, she has to deal with some of this family history, and
Right.
and some of her history with Shane that she doesn't necessarily know, and to do that she has to confront her mother as well. Yeah, so we have a question from somebody about breaking into the industry as a Black writer writing about Black couples. And I think that, you know, most Black consumers of stories, you know, whether it's on television, whether it's in books, we're certainly told first that Black people don't read. We're certainly told that, you know, Black love doesn't sell. We're certainly, you know, and sort of what's been your journey with that? And also, I think this person wants to know if you have any tips or advice for emerging writers in this area.
Well, the tips and advice would be you're doing it at the right time, because right now, you know, post-Trump, post-BLM, you know, the publishers are really self-consciously looking for diverse voices from LGBTQ plus, different, anyone outside of being a white man, you know, because honestly, like, it was a white male dominated industry for a long time. So now is the time. But yeah, like I think having a recognizable byline in, you know, in very popular magazines helped me, because back then, you know, in the early 2000s, it was so impossible to get anyone to believe that, like you said, we would read a Black love story, that anyone else but us would read it if we did. And why aren't you writing about Black struggle? Because the publishing industry has always been so monochromatic, meaning definitely all white. a lot of times the editors, all they know of Black people is what they've learned in school and what they learned during Black History Month, which is seeing us through the lens of symbolic oppression. And, Black people were enslaved, and then Abe Lincoln freed them, and then things also kind of sucked after that. And then Martin Luther King came and he tried, but he was killed for his troubles, and so was Malcolm X. And now we have affirmative action. Like, it's all us being victims, and there's no humanity there. And if you look at the books that were big books over the past, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, it was Roots, it was The Help, it was, books about Beloved, which is my favorite book. But it's very dark and scary. It's horror. It's horror. And we don't get any fun. And that's a bummer. And I was talking to someone about this. I know someone who's like an influencer in the vintage fashion thrifting space, this Black woman, and she dresses up in 30s, 40s, 50s clothes and takes pictures of herself, and it's amazing. And she gets a lot of blowback about it because she's like, why would you want to dress up like a white woman in the 40s? And her response is, at a time when we were so oppressed and Jim Crow, and she's like, first of all, Black people have always been people. We always love to get dressed and go out with our friends and have a good time. You want to talk about Sunday? You want to talk about the fact that so many of these designers came from Black seamstresses, and Black Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress was made by a designed and made by a Black woman. It strips away our humanity to think that we were only oppressed. I mean, we're oppressed today, and we still love to have a good time and have fun and be in love and live full lives. So, but that's something that was really hard for editors to see. And I would get a lot of pushback, like, this is a really cute, fun story, but can you write a little bit about how your characters are feeling oppressed at this time? And, The Perfect Find, the book I wrote before 7 Days in June, is about a Black fashion editor, and editors just did not understand that at all, and didn't think anyone would get that a Black woman is working in the fashion industry, and they wanted me to change the industry to something else. And it was just a nightmare. It was really hard. And I was rejected by every traditional publisher, every single one. So I went with an independent publisher, which was really almost like self-publishing. And I am not business lady. I am not entrepreneur girl. It really works for some people to have control of all of the, the marketing, the sales, all of that. I cannot. So it was really, really tough for me. And I was like, okay, this is it for me in this industry. And, now it's going to be a Netflix movie starring Gabrielle Union coming out next year. So that's just a testament to publishers being wrong about what's sellable and what's marketable and what we're interested in, and also what can be relatable for anyone. So keep at it. And again, now is the time.
No, thank you for all of that. And I think it's so interesting, sort of like the dominant narratives that even we ourselves can take in, what Black means, because it's not like 7 Days in June doesn't have tragedy in it. It has tragedy in it. It has pain in it. It has, but it's this multifaceted, it's couched in between all the things that are couched in between daily life all the time. Pain is couched between, hilarity and boring stuff and neutral stuff and
life.
Right.
Yeah.
Like just fully fleshed out Black life. And that kind of brings me to my next question. The Black writing and publishing community is almost another character in the novel. And this is not really a world we see represented on the page. and with such affection, insight, hilarity, and vulnerability. And I have a personal pet peeve whenever I find out, whenever I read a book, and in the first few pages I find out one of the protagonists is a writer, I get salty and I'm like, oh, this book's gonna suck, because it's just gonna be like, the writer's not like using their imagination, like they're just like pontificating. You know what I mean? Like it's just gonna be like an exercise and like, I'm so great, I'm so whatever. And then this is like one of the first books, it might be the only book that I've read where I'm like, it just wasn't about that at all. Like it just felt like both of these characters were just trying to get to each other, and then like writing was like sort of a means to do that, but then they're in this Black literati space. And so then there's these other characters like Cece, who's such an interesting and powerful, as you say, secondary character who really reads like a protagonist in a lot of ways. So I just wonder if you can talk a little bit about, what role sort of like this Black writing and publishing community, plays in the novel for you.
Well, there's so many characters out there like them, I really wanted to have this scene with Eva on the panel at the book event because, she's on the she's a panelist on this panel discussing the life of Black authors in 2019. And so, or maybe it was before, I don't remember when the book is set, but it's post-Trump.
It's 2019.
It is 2019, yes. Yep. And so it's all about just talking about, what we just spoke about. But Eva, who writes vampire erotica, doesn't feel that she says something like, yes, I'm woke in my private life, but the people on that panel are woke. Oh, she says, I'm woke recreationally, but they're woke professionally. Like they're quoted in, Time magazine. Like I don't, and we are sort of separated like that. No one's going to ask me to pontificate about race relations in America, though I have thoughts. No one's gonna ask me because I write
a lot of those thoughts in the novel. I will say, yes, they're in there.
But women's fiction is sidelined because things that women are interested in are silly, and so she's on this panel with these like hard-hitting guys, and I know some of these, really acclaimed, fabulous Black male authors that write these really tough nonfiction books about, being Black in America, and they are a trip. They have the opinion and that's it. And it's always, so often it's Black male focused to the exclusion of the rest of us that are out here struggling too. So I just wanted to touch on how Black people, we are obviously not a monolith. You can have 5 different Black authors on a panel and they all are coming from totally different points of view. And so I wanted to show that.
It cracked me up. I mean, maybe it's like a little bit too close because I've been, I don't write vampire erotica, but, I've been on some of those panels, where the Blacker Than Thou and,
yeah.
I really appreciated, sort of, the kind of, space that he took up and like the way that he was sort of like playing it, right? But then you have these other wonderful characters like Belinda, who's this, like amazing poet. But like she's also multifaceted. Like she dates like men like 20 years younger than her, who like, like whatever, and like dresses in a very certain way, and like, but she's like also hilarious, like Cece. And, it's like I just felt like I know all these people, like I know them. And so it was just kind of a wonderful, it just was a wonderful way to sort of get at this particular slice of Black life through Black literati. So thank you for that. We have a question about the film adaptations of your projects and what you can share.
I can't really share anything because I don't know that much. So 7 days in June, no, The Perfect Find wrapped filming, and it will be on Netflix in spring of 2023. So now it's in this stage where I it's like film speak, and I don't really know. They're like editing, and but it's all been shot and it's beautiful. And I was on set last summer when they were shooting. I got a cameo, so that's really exciting. And yeah, like it, from what I saw on set, it was my first time on a movie set. Like it's going to be magical. And the director, Numa Perrier, is just, she's such a visionary. So I'm really excited for that. And 7 days in June, we're still at the beginning stages of putting together the team. And that is going to be a series. So not a movie. Yeah. So that's all I've got.
That's a lot, though. Congratulations on all of that, particularly, it sounds like in terms of publishing industry stuff, like you had some blockades kind of set up in your way.
Yes.
And so it must be like even sweeter now to kind of, be on the other side of that. Like, of course, that's not why you write the novel, right?
But it's nice.
Yes, totally.
It's nice to get the gratification.
I don't know if you can hear my son yelling at my daughter in the background, but this is where we're at. Okay. That time of night. Okay, we have another question from an audience member. What other Black woman in romance would you recommend to someone who's devoured your work and that of the equally delightful Victoria Christopher Murray?
I love Jasmine Guillory. Do not turn on that water. Talia Hibbert writes great romance, and her characters, there's some great disability representation and neurodivergence. It's brilliant, her romance. And Alyssa Cole, I love. So those are three that I am really into. Yeah, those are my faves. My contemporary faves. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Hey, excuse me, I'm still doing this. Stop. Go that way, please. Okay, that's enough. What did I say? I have 5 minutes. Okay, this is my life, and so we all make do with it. Yeah. I thought you might understand. I'm a single mother myself, so yes. So this question, what are you yourself reading these days?
Well, I am working on my next novel. It's due on June 1st. Sadly, no, it's so scary. So I'm currently not reading anything because I don't have the time. But there's a lot that I would like to read. I still haven't read, I love Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I still haven't read, came out last year, Malibu Rising. So I would love to read that. I never read Cast, and I am a huge fan of The Warmth of Other Suns. So that I will definitely read this summer when I have time to read. And I'm sorry, I'm not really good with this right now because I have to ban myself from reading in order to get through writing.
No, I totally understand. And it's also like, I feel like when I'm talking to one of my friends about like, okay, let's get lunch. And then they're like, oh, where should we go? And suddenly I can't think of any place to eat lunch, even though
it's like you've never been anywhere.
I've never been out to lunch in my life. Suddenly, when you're put on the spot, it's like, oh, I don't read. I don't read. Right. No, I completely get it. So, Yeah, and I think that we are going to start wrapping it up, Tia. I don't know if it's been such a delight to talk to you, and I really, I write across genre as well, and I read across genre, and so I just
Yeah.
really appreciate everything that you're doing to just tell the kind of story and the kind of truth that you feel compelled, you feel drawn
Yes.
to put on the page. So
Well, I will do it as long as I'm allowed. I love it.
good. I'm so glad. So I am going to read from the outro here for all of you who are with us on the webinar. And Tia, thank you so much again for sharing your time and your warmth and your expertise.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was so fun.
It was really fun, wasn't it? This has been a virtual presentation of Club Book, a long-running literary series of MELSA made possible by the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Special thanks again to Carver County Library for the part they played in bringing Tia to us. Before you log off, look for the Club Book survey link, which is in the comments and will be projected in place of my video momentarily. Last, consider joining Club Book this Thursday for the spring season finale, featuring chart-topping fantasy favorite Rebecca Roanhorse. The New York Times describes Roanhorse as prominent among, quote, the small cohort of indigenous novelists reshaping North American science fiction, horror, and fantasy, genres in which Native writers have long been overlooked, end quote. This one will be co-hosted with St. Paul Public Library. They'll be right here on Facebook Live, and as always, it's free. Hope to see you there. And please have a great night, everyone. Good night.
Good night.